Listen to me. If there was a wise man who would ever think of this, they would say in order to be superior to the man, you've got to be the man. For I am the man himself.
What is going on? This is the Club of the Man 1993, and of course anytime I talk about Drew McIntyre, I'm tempted to talk in a Scottish accent, and I'm nowhere close to being Scottish whatsoever. I think my wife is somewhat Scottish. Can't remember for sure, but anyways, on a serious note, yes, this is the Club of the Man 1993. This is episode number 29 of this WWE review series. We're almost done. We're almost to the 37th and final episode in this series, currently for now. But we have a pretty good one to talk about tonight, and that is the episode called Drew McIntyre, The Chosen One, which is kind of going more in depth about Drew McIntyre's journey that wasn't talked about in the previous one from WrestleMania, The Show Must Go On, for WrestleMania 36. This goes a little more in depth on Drew's journey to main eventing WrestleMania 36 and winning his first ever world title, fulfilling himself as the Chosen One, and some lessons he had to learn along the way, and some things, some vices he had to overcome as well. It's a pretty good story. Drew, again, kind of had to be hit with a little bit of a reality check. And, basically someone that I think had to wake up a little bit and experience some failure. Because from what it sounded like, Drew was kind of overconfident up until he started facing some struggles in like 2011 and whatnot around that time, before going into 3MB and just like starting to not take something seriously and whatnot, and just kind of going through a rough period, which, okay, he has some personal things going on as well, but this man definitely grew a lot. He also is one of several stars that left WWE, reinvented themselves on the indies, and then came back and became an even bigger star. Drew McIntyre is indeed one of those. I think he has a very good, inspiring story that he shared in this documentary. As he said at the beginning, nothing ever goes right and smooth for Drew McIntyre. It makes a pretty good story. He said that while they were playing the 24 logo and showing the title of it, basically. And he was kind of right. He had to adapt to different things. So, let's talk about this story of Drew McIntyre. So, we all know Drew grew up in Ayr, Scotland. I don't know if they ever said if his parents were divorced or whatnot, but they did talk about his mother and how they lived in a smaller apartment growing up, because his mother did get diagnosed with some sort of, I forgot what it was called, some disease where it affects your balance. So, she had like a smaller apartment for like closer walls and just things to help make it easy for her to get around it. Drew had a very good bond with his mom, and definitely when he lost her in 2012 to cancer, it was a very rough time in his life. So, obviously he grew up a huge wrestling fan. Apparently he wouldn't do homework, he would do his wrestling work, as they call it. Huge fans of like Stone Cold Steve Austin and several others as well. He basically was laser focused on becoming a wrestler. I think it was around like 14 or 15 years old, he had found a school maybe like 4 or 5 hours away from him or something like that he wanted to attend. But his family, of course, at first said, no, you need to make the money to, afford that. And he did. and him and a friend did take a train. I think they said they had to go through like 4 different stops or something like that. I think it might have been a little longer than like 4 or 5 hours, but it was a little bit of a train drive. And this was also during a time too as well where there wasn't a lot of like wrestlers overseas who were being recognized in America and in the WWE. So he obviously wanted to be the first Scottish or British born world champion. So he would, of course, go to wrestling school. He would then, of course, wrestle on the indies and whatnot. And he was picking up things pretty quick. Based on, of course, how he, what much of a fan he was, how much he studied and, like, watched others. He even had, I think him and some of his friends even had their own, like, for fun wrestling promotion they did in their backyard, wrestling on top of mattresses called, like, XF, WF, I can't remember what it was called, but it was like Extreme Scottish Backyard Wrestling or something like that they called it, or Backyard Federation. I can't remember what they called it, but yeah, they wrestled in the backyard, he was dedicated to this. But again, he even said too, it was one of those things where it's like for a while he just felt like everything was going to fall right into place. And kind of getting a little overconfident. Like, there was a time where he said something like, that, oh, don't worry, when I get to WWE, Vince will cover all that. He was that confident that he even said a line like that. But he was excellent on the indies. That's, of course, where he met guys like Wade Barrett, Sheamus. They even interviewed Wolfgang, who's part of Gallus in NXT. Killian Dane was interviewed too, and Nikki Cross as well, throughout this documentary. A lot of Scottish wrestlers who, and even Noam Dar too, who talked about Drew as well in this documentary. So I think he eventually did sign with WWE in like 2006 or 2007, around the same time where Sheamus and Wade Barrett had signed also. And he was up on SmackDown pretty quickly in 2007. But obviously after his first match, they did realize this kid is great, but he has some work to do. So they send him back down to FCW for 2 years, which no problem. He went back down there. He won the FCW world title. And then it was around 2009 where they were talking, well, at the time also, they were talking about that ECW brand that they're bringing back. And Drew thought first he was going to be on ECW. But no, instead, they put him on SmackDown, and he re-debuted on SmackDown in 2009, and Vince introduced him as the Chosen One. Which, again, that kind of got to his head again, thinking that, okay, yeah, everything's going to fall right into place. Now it's time for me to take over the main event scene and be a world champion, basically. Of course, his first singles title on the main roster was the Intercontinental title, but it was around this time in like 2010 where things started to go a little downhill. Like, this is why I said, like, up until this point, Drew was very confident and kind of took a little bit of things for granted, it seemed like. There was some original plans that were thrown out there. Like, originally, apparently, at WrestleMania 26, there was talk about him facing The Undertaker. Which, of course, that didn't happen. Shawn Michaels did in his retirement match. And then he was put into the Money in the Bank ladder match, and there was talks about him winning Money in the Bank. He didn't. Instead, it was Jack Swagger. And that kind of was a slap in the face to Drew a little bit. Like, that was kind of like his reality check that, not everything's going to go as smoothly as you think it is. And during this time as well, he was facing a divorce with, I think, for WWE star Tiffany, I think it was. I can't remember who it was, but yeah, he was married to her for like a year and then they divorced. And then it was around this time also, his mother got diagnosed with cancer. And she died in 2012, which that also took a toll on him. And it was during this time also he met his now wife, Caitlyn. He met her at a bar. And the other thing too was Drew started like drinking a lot and partying. So he was kind of falling apart a little bit. And eventually, of course, they put him in 3MB. But at that point, even like Caitlyn said when they lived together during this time, she said that he just wasn't taking his life seriously. Like, there was days where she had to get him out of bed to get to the airport to fly to Raw or SmackDown, wherever he had to go to, and he just literally had no motivation. He didn't like being in 3MB. Well, he liked Heath and Jinder, but he didn't like being in 3MB, because he basically viewed it as like, this is a whatever group. And then eventually he was released in 2014, along with several others, which he was definitely shocked when that happened. He called his dad, and I guess his dad kind of helped him, like, you know, like, pick himself back up and get out there. So he knew he wanted to go back to the indies, and knew that he had to just start over and find that passion again with wrestling. And he immediately wanted to go back to, I think it was called ICW or something. I think it was ICW he called it. He had like a heroes type return, of course, as Drew Galloway. And he would go on to just really do a ton of things between 2014 and 2017 on the indies as Drew Galloway, and just totally reinvented himself. And, you know, he became, even like that first promo he cut when he made his return to the indies in 2014 to ICW, he said for one of the first times in a long time, he felt he was just talking like himself. And that's, I think, what kind of helped him, you know, become a much better natural talker. He started taking more advantage of social media and everything to help, like, get himself out there. And he became, like, probably one of the biggest stars on the indies, for sure, during that time. Even though, of course, he was finding himself again professionally, he wasn't finding himself personally. Because Caitlyn still mentioned that he was still going out drinking, making times with old friends. Like, she said that he was so busy that she was lucky if she even got to see him for a week, once a month. And it came to a point where it was basically, she's like, you know, I can't keep doing this. You got to make a decision here. And the biggest thing is he had to quit drinking. And I think she even called his family, and they were able to help Drew turn it around. He started sticking to a different diet that got him off his drinking, and yeah, that's when he started to mature a lot more personally. Not long after that, him and Caitlyn got married, and then after a successful time on the indies, he was still kept in good touch with William Regal, and Regal said, "Hey, do you want to talk to Triple H?" He talked to Triple H, and they made plans to bring him back to NXT, where he was going to be there briefly, just to, you know, basically get cooking again, and then get called up to the main roster. And his first appearance was at NXT TakeOver Orlando in 2017. They had him sing in the crowd, and then of course they had like the camera pan, and they acknowledged that he was in the crowd, and then that's when they announced that he had signed with NXT. He got a very, very great reaction, a great welcome back. Everybody was definitely excited to see him, and his run at NXT was brief, but he still had a good run. He won the NXT Championship a few months later that summer at NXT TakeOver Brooklyn 3, I believe it was that year, defeating Bobby Roode. The match, I remember, was a little meh. It was definitely not one of the strongest NXT main events at the time, but it was just the chemistry with him and Bobby Roode wasn't quite there. But he did have, I know one of my favorite matches he had in NXT for me personally as champion was his match he had with Roderick Strong. That's the match that I think also made me a fan of Roddy big time too. Even before that, when he became the number one contender, he had a great match with Killian Dane, I remember. He did, though, get injured at War Games when he fought Andrade, and he dropped the title to Andrade. And then after that, they just kind of breezed through the rest of his run until he got to the Rumble, where he debuted on the main roster again during the Superstar Shakeup 2018, teaming up with Dolph Ziggler, which people forget, but that I feel like that actually was good for Drew to help him get his feet wet back on the main roster, was being Dolph Ziggler's lackey. And then, in 2019, he kind of went on of his own, did some single stuff, but wasn't quite in the main event scene yet. And then 2020, we all know, he won the Rumble. And he even mentioned, how like everything was just perfect. He goes, what could possibly go wrong? And then we talked about last time the pandemic happened. And as we said before, he was actually overseas when it was starting to increase and basically become a shutdown. He was overseas filming a commercial, and they had to get him back just before they weren't allowing anybody to cross over the borders anymore. So he just got back. And again, although he was disappointed for sure that he doesn't get his big moment in front of fans, he then took it as an opportunity to help people during a difficult time. And that's exactly what he did. His match, though, was filmed, of course, in an empty arena, of course, in the empty performance center for WrestleMania 36. They were filmed on March the 26th, I believe it was. And of course, he got to, for one, probably only times, sit down with his wife and watch him win the title. And then, of course, he didn't tell his family, but afterwards they zoomed with his family and just congratulated him and said how proud of them he was of them, and he just said some good words and whatnot. And yeah, he came a long way for sure from his days with 3MB. From 2010 to 2014, he was really off again with just obviously taking those first change of plans very hard, and then losing his mother, and then his drinking problems. But he was able to overcome all of it, reinvent himself, become more stronger professionally and personally. Now he has a great life with an amazing wife, and he's now a 3-time world champion. And yeah, he found his groove. So I think this story very well told. I had the hiccups now. The story of Drew McIntyre's journey to get to the top of WrestleMania 36. Yeah, it had its hiccup there with the pandemic. But, yeah, an inspirational story for anybody who definitely dealt with the stuff that Drew went through. And yeah, he's definitely a very accomplished career. Maybe a Hall of Famer someday, maybe. And, yeah, I thought this was another really good 24 documentary, as most of them are. So that's my review on W24, Drew McIntyre, The Chosen One. The next one we do for episode number 30 is one that I have not seen, but I'm surprised how big of a fan I am of this guy that I hadn't seen this documentary yet. And that's on Keith Lee. And I believe it's his journey to when he became a double champ at NXT Great American Bash in 2020. So again, I've never seen it before, but I do look forward to checking it out definitely within the next week or so. So, geez, got the hiccups. So guys, that's my thoughts on Drew McIntyre, The Chosen One 24 special. What are you guys' thoughts on this documentary? You leave guys' thoughts down in the comment section below. Slap a like on the video and subscribe for more content on my channel. Follow me on Twitter as well at the Club with the Man 93. You may also follow me on Instagram at the Club with the Man 1993. And until then, guys, I'm checking out. I'll catch you all later. I'll get rid of these hiccups too. Have a great rest of your night. Do not forget as well, in order to be superior to the man, you've got to be the man. And for I am the man himself. And that is not just an opinion, my friends. That is a fact of life. But hiccup again. Here we go. Yeah!